So how did they get the stones to stack on top of the other stones in Stonehenge? This is a really interesting problem. For one, the blocks are so big, and the height of them is so big. I guess it kind of helps to have a picture here. Stonehenge. Okay. Yeah, let's just do this here. So was my video covering that? Oh, I can't tell. Okay. Okay. Oh my. Okay, it's not. Okay. So. All computers work so well. I love it. So. We have this problem of how do we get the stones on top of the other stones. And they're so big, they're so heavy, hard to move around. What possible way could you, how could you possibly get them up this high? So, there's interesting research that's went into this, and there's like this famous video from CBC or something of this guy going and he's showing different techniques where you can move around these big blocks using leverage and mechanical advantage. And just like putting like a big arm on something and moving it, and like putting like a rock underneath something, and having it balance on the rock, and now you can manipulate the weight much more easier than if the thing was just stationary on the ground because of all the friction against the ground. So the interesting thing with this is, right, so he had, in his video, he showed how you could lift them up, and by using them as a teeter-totter, and so you put some sort of thing under the middle, and then you have someone like step on this side, and it lifts it up, and then you can get like something a little bit more underneath there, and have someone step on this side, and it's going to lift it up a bit more, and you can sort of teeter-totter and ladder it all the way up to the height that you need. And so that's fine, so you can raise the block up really high, but then you have to set it on top of the pillars. So how do you do that? Now there's other video I saw where some university group or something they did this, and what they did was they had raised this block up beside these blocks, and then they tried to slide it over on top. And this had a lot of logistical issues because it had to lubricate the entire thing, and it had like fat and stuff on it, and then they have to, right, they got like using like crowbars and stuff or whatever to try to slowly push and maneuver this thing from up from like whatever they raised it on to over on top of these. And like the crazy thing about these is that they're like, some of them are mortise and tenon, and so they have like a little peg that comes up out of the rock and sticks into a hole into the other one. And so to do that, where you raise it up and then you're sliding it around and you're trying to get it and align it up to the pins and then have it sit down, seems quite complicated. Okay, so what other possible way could you do to get this block on top? if you can't like lift it up beside it and then move it over and put it on. And so like with any task you're doing, order of operations is really important. So so all of the work into figuring out how Stonehenge is built assumes that the columns are the blocks that are placed first, and then you have to put the other one on top. Okay, but order of operations is important. So what if instead you raised the block up first and then put the pillars underneath and supported it? So what was the observation I made that brought me to this conclusion? It was a Smarter Everyday video where he was they were building silos on farms, and the way they build these they're like these big stainless steel silos that hold grain, and so you would they build the roof first, and then they jack up the roof a little bit, and then they weld on a like one strip all the way around the bottom, and then they jack it up a little bit, and then they weld another strip on around the bottom, they jack it up, and they weld it, and they keep doing it, and they end up building a silo. And which is funny, because I assumed they would have built those like on the ground, like have it laying down like a rocket, right? And then yeah, like put it on top, on back of like a big truck, take it to where you need to build it, and then like tip it up. But of course that's way simpler to raise the roof first, right? So okay, so what would this look like? So what you would do, let's go back to this one, is so you raise, we do that teeter-tottering method with stacking stuff up to raise this the top ceiling block here, and so you raise that up, but then you leave everything in place, and okay, and then you have to get these pillars to stand up. And so with the pillars, they are buried in the ground a little bit, and so you have to dig a hole for them, right? So you dig a hole for these pillars, and okay, so what do you do first? And so now there's so many little operations, so it's like which one comes first now? So like first we're going to raise the roof first, but now we have this issue of the holes for the pillars, and so would those be in the way if we were trying to raise the roof? So do we raise the roof first and then try to dig them out? That seems kind of dangerous. So if I were doing this, I would dig out the holes for the pillars first, and then I would raise the roof. And oh, this is so cool. So as you're raising it, you're tipping it back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and what you effectively have is a giant hammer, right? So as you're doing the thing, you're placing your wood underneath, you're teeter-tottering it up. You have to come down and slam down on the ground. And So what you do is maybe you add some extra wood, or you add something in the hole for the rock to slam onto, and so that the first little bit as you're doing this, you're hammering the ground and you're tamping the ground to give a nice solid base for these columns to sit on. So now you've got this nice tamped down base. You've got the roof block raised up in the air on this column of wood. That'd be kind of scary. And then you've got to flip these blocks up into their holes. So I think out of every kind of like weird mystery like this, is probably the least controversial one ever. Is like, okay, so you just like sort of take the block and okay, so you take the block and you just sort of, you kind of have to tip it in the hole and tip it up. And so the idea here is that you do the same sort of thing. So you start with the block on the ground, and then you raise it up, and then you can dunk it into the hole and stand it up. And there's some interesting, there's one thing I saw at someone did some computer simulations where they showed that the way that these columns were built, they were like fatter at the bottom and skinnier at the top, and so that would of course make them want to stand up if you were to tip them into a hole. But also they like showed that they could have, if they had the ability to get the tipping to happen, that they could have had the top piece on the top and flipped the whole thing into the hole, which is kind of interesting. But okay, so but you to get the block, to get the column one, once you maneuver it into position, to where you can raise it up to tip it in. Now you're over the hole, so you'd have to like fill the hole with something, right, so that it doesn't fall in while you're raising it, and that would be like the thing you'd put in there for tamping, right? And so it all kind of fits together. So okay, so where are we? We've got the roof raised, we've got the columns lifted up, but now so in order for the columns to stand up, the roof would have to be taller than when it's the height that it's going to be set down at when it's finally done, right? So that the column blocks don't run into it. And so you have these you have these columns standing up, and then you have the wood column here, and then you have the roof block, which is hovering just a bit over top of the other blocks, and now you light the wood on fire, and it burns away, and it lowers the roof right down onto the columns, and that would be quite like a ceremonial thing, right? Right, we're going to place this block, so you're going to light up the big fire and let it lower down into place. And so now it's like, okay, so we've got this we've got this complicated, or we've got this technique for building it, and then you look at it and it's not done. And it's like, well, I wonder why, because how dangerous it was. Having these blocks up in the air on these wooden columns. Okay, now you may be looking at this and be like, oh, I gotcha. Let's see how skinny this gap is. There's no way you could put enough wood in there to support this block while it's floating in the air. And so here's where it gets really cool. So what you do is, well, we know that they had the ability to shape these stones how they wanted. We know there's cut marks, there's the mortise and tenon and whatnot. So these roof blocks, you just make them way longer to start with. And so then you raise this big roof block, and then you get the columns underneath it to support it, and now you have this skinny little gap which looks super impressive, and then you just chop off the ends, and maybe they're reused for the other roofs or something. And like the orientation of all the blocks, like why is it like this on top of this? Like, it's a weird thing. Like, we build stuff like this, right? But this is like this. Like, why would it be like that? And that's why. See that's the technique where they have to raise it up and you flip them in. Oh, it's so cool.